Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Dear students, welcome again in Pakistan International School, Taif, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Virtual Learning System Session 2020. This is English for grade 6. Name of the book is Around the World in 80 Days. Today's lesson is lecture number 25, chapter 2, The Conversation Which Cost Philip Fogg dearly. We'll do the reading and exercise. I'm your teacher, Adnan Sabir Mirza. So let's start with the chapter number 2. Here we are. Yes. Open your books. This is page number 13. The conversation which cost Phileas Fogg dearly. Phileas Fogg reached the Reform Club, an impressive edifice in Pall Mall. Edifice means a large building. He went straight to the dining room and took his place at his usual table. After taking his lunch, Phileas Fogg headed towards the saloon. Headed means forwarded. A luxurious room adorned with paintings. This is the definition of saloon. It was a luxurious room. Adorned means decorated with paintings. A servant handed him a copy of The Times. This is the name of the newspaper. Fogg read the paper till a quarter before 4. Then he began reading the Standard till the dinner hour. These are the names of newspapers and magazines. After dinner, Fogg reappeared in the reading room at 20 minutes before 6 and sat down to pursue the Daily Telegraph. Another newspaper, Daily Telegraph. Half an hour later, other members of the club drew up to the fireplace at the reading room and began talking about a robbery which had taken place at the Bank of England. They were Mr. Fogg's partners at the whist. So they were his partner for the card games. Andy Stott, an engineer, John Sullivan, and Samuel Flanton, bankers. Thomas Flanagan, a brewer, and Gauthier Rao, one of the directors of the Bank of England. All his partners were highly affluent and reputable. Affluent means they were influential and respectable people. Ralph, how do you think the robbery will affect the bank? Asked Thomas Flanagan. The bank will lose lots of money, replied Stott. Next page. I hope we can lay our hands on the robber. Skillful detectives have been dispatched to all the ports of America and the continent. If he slips through their fingers, he will be a clever fellow, said Ralph. Here's the picture of the meeting and the discussion. Next page. But do you have the robber's description? Asked Stott. First of all, he is not a robber at all. replied Rob. A person who runs away with 55,000 pounds is no robber but a manufacturer, I suppose. The Daily Telegraph mentions him as a gentleman, said a voice from behind the newspaper. It was Phileas Fogg who passed his remark. The robbery, which had become the talk of the town, had occurred 3 days ago at the Bank of England. Banknotes amounting to 55,000 pounds were stolen from the table of the principal cashier, which he was engaged in registering the receipt of 3 shillings and 6 pennies. Principal cashier means the main cashier. As soon as the robbery was discovered, detectives were dispatched to Liverpool, Glasgow, Havre, Suez, Brindisi, New York, and other ports. Detectives were also told to watch people who arrived or left London by rail. According to the Daily Telegraph, the chief did not belong to a the thief did not belong to a professional group. On the day of the robbery, a well-dressed gentleman had been seen marching back and forth in the room where the crime was committed. The description of the thief was easily acquired and sent to various detectives. Everywhere, people were discussing the possibilities of a successful pursuit. The Reform Club was deeply concerned as one of its members was a bank official. Ralph and Stark sat at the whist table and continued to argue on the matter. Chances are in favor of the thief, maintained Stark. Which country can he fly to? Asked Ralph. No country is safe for him. Anywhere, anywhere. The world is big enough, said Stark. It was once, said Flisco. What do you mean by once? Had the world grown smaller? Asked Rob. Certainly, I agree with Flisco, replied Rob. The world has grown smaller. Since a man can go around it in 10 times more quickly than 100 years ago. And that is why the search for the thief will succeed. But Stott was not convinced. He said, Graf, you have a strange way of proving that the world has grown smaller just because you can go around the world in 3 months, in 80 days. Phileas Fogg interrupted. That is true, gentlemen, added John Sullivan. Here is an estimate made by Daily Telegraph from London to Suez via Mount Sinus and Brindisi by rail and steamboat 7 days from Suez to Bombay steamer 13 days from Bombay to Calcutta by rail 3 days from Calcutta to Hong Kong by steamer 13 days from Hong Kong to Yokohama Japan by steamer 6 days San Francisco by steamer from San Francisco by steamer 22 days from San Francisco to New York by rail 7 days from New York to London and by steamer and rail 9 days, total 80 days. But do these 80 days take into account bad weather, contrary winds, shipwrecks, railway accidents, and so on? Asked Todd. All included, replied Phyllis Fogg. You are right theoretically, but practically, said Stott. Practically also, Phileas Fogg, said Phileas Fogg. I would like to see you do it in 80 days, said Stott. It depends on you. Shall we go together? Asked Phileas Fogg. Heaven preserve me, but I would bet 4,000 pounds. That such a journey in 80 days is impossible, said Stott. Quite possible, replied Phileas Fogg. Well, make it, then, challenged Stott. I should like nothing better. When? At once. But I warn you, I shall do it at your expense. It is absurd, cried Stott. But, Mr. Fogg, I will do so. I will wager 4,000 pounds on this journey. All right, said Mr. Fogg. Have a deposit of 20,000 pounds at Barings, which I will willingly risk on this. But Mr. Fogg, 80 days are only the approximate estimate of the time in which the journey can be made, etc. A well used minimum time is sufficient for everything, said Fogg. You will need to jump mathematically from train to steamers and from steamers to train again in order not to exceed it. I will jump mathematically. You are joking. A true Englishman doesn't joke when he is talking about a wager, said Mr. Fogg solemnly. I will bet 20,000 pounds against anyone who wants me to go around the world in 80 days. Do you accept? We accept, replied Stott, Pellington, Sullivan, Flanagan, and Ralph, after consulting each other. Perfect, said Phileas Fogg. I will leave by train for Dover at a quarter before 9. Today is Wednesday, the 2nd of October. I shall land in London in this very room at the Reform Club on Saturday, the 21st of December, at a quarter before 9, or else the 20,000 pounds will be yours. Gentlemen, here is the check for the amount. A memorandum of the wager was drawn up and signed by the 6 men. So the agreement of the bet was written and signed by 6 people. As the clock struck 7, Phileas Fogg left the Reform Club. Passepartout, who had by now studied the list of master's duties, was surprised to see his master at this hour. According to the rule, Mr. Fogg was not due home until midnight. Phileas Fogg went straight to his bedroom and called out Passepartout. Mr. Fogg called him again. Passepartout made his appearance. I called you twice, said Mr. Fogg. But it is not midnight, said Passepartout. I know you are not to be blamed, said Fogg. We are leaving in 10 minutes. A puzzled smile came on Passepartout's face. He had not understood his master. Sir, are you going to leave home? We are going around the world, replied Phileas Fogg. Passepartout, overcome with stupefied astonishment, murmured, around the world? In 80 days, added Fogg. So we cannot afford to lose a moment. We will carry no trunks, only an overnight bag with 2 shirts and 3 pairs of stockings for me and the same for you. We will buy clothes on the way. Bring down my mackintosh and traveling cloak and shoes. Mechanically, Passepartout set about making the preparation for departure. He thought around the world in 80 days. Was his master a fool, or was this a joke? By 8 o'clock, Passepartout had packed the overnight bag and soon joined his master. Phileas Fogg took a copy of Bradshaw's Continental Railway Steam Transit and General Guide, with its timetables showing the arrival and departures of steamers and railways. Mr. Fogg took the bag from passport out, slipped a roll of Macintosh is a waterproof coat. But now if you say Macintosh, it is a laptop. Mr. Fogg took the bag from passport out, slipped a roll of banknotes into it and handed over the bag to passport out. They descended the stairs and double locked the house door, took the cab from the end of the Savile Row and drove to Charing Cross railway station. They bought two first-class tickets and were crossing the station to board the train. When Mr. Fogg saw his five friends of the club, Mr. Fogg said, "Well, gentlemen, I'm off. On my return from the tour, you can examine my passport to verify if you have accomplished the journey agreed upon." "Oh, Mr. Fogg, that will not be necessary," said Ralph politely. "We will trust your word." "Do not forget when you are due in London," said Stott. "In 80 days on Saturday, the 21st of December, 1872, at 9:15. "Goodbye, gentlemen," said Phileas Fogg. Phileas Fogg and his servant sat in the first-class carriage at 25 minutes before 9. 5 minutes later, the train left the station. It was a dark night when it started raining heavily. Suddenly, Passepartout uttered a shriek. "What is the matter?" asked Mr. Fogg. "In a hurry, I forgot to turn off the gas in my room." "Very well. It will burn at your expense," said Mr. Fogg coolly. The light was on and the electricity bill was to be paid by Passepartout, the servant. Next page. Yes. Soon the news of the bet spread through the Reform Club, and it became an excited topic of the conversation. Conversation is the talking between or a meeting. When some people talk to each other, it is called a conversation. Some supported Phileas Fogg, but the majority felt it was impossible that a journey around the world could be made in such a short time. From the club, it soon got into the papers throughout England. The Times, the Standard, Morning Post, and Daily News, and 20 other newspapers wrote articles against Phileas Fogg. The Daily Telegraph, though hesitant, talked positively. Numerous columns devoted to Phileas Fogg began appearing in each newspaper, which were eagerly read by all classes of readers. Heavy wagers were made for and against Mr. Fogg. Bonds were issued and made their appearance on the London Exchange. Phileas Fogg bonds were offered at par or and at a premium. But soon after, an article appeared in the Bulletin of Royal Geographical Society that stated the folly of the tour. Most people lost faith in Phileas Fogg's ability to win the wager, and the demand for Fogg's bond began to dwindle. Dwindle means shaky. Columns, parts of a printed page. Bonds, a written agreement or promise. So this was the reading section of chapter 2. Now we'll quickly jump into the exercise. Students, exercises are very important with regard to the examination. So you are supposed to write them in your notebooks, in your copies, and learn them for the test and the midterm exams, which are very near. Uh, answer the following question. Number one, name the five friends of Phileas Fogg. Number two, what were the five gentlemen at the Reform Club talking about? Number three, how did the robbery in the Bank of England led to the bet between Mr. Fogg and his friends? Four, what were the terms and conditions laid down in the wager? Number five, what would your luggage compromise of on a journey around the world? Answers: Andrew Stott, John Sullivan, Samuel Flanton, Thomas Flanagan, Gauthier Rao. They were the five friends. Number two, they were talking about a bank robbery. Number three, while discussing about robbery, Mr. Fogg's friend said that the world is so big and the robber can go anywhere, while Mr. Fogg said, here we need a full stop, and also here. While Mr. Fogg said that world is small enough that one can go around in 80 days. In 80 days. This led them to bet to go around the world in 80 days. Fourth, terms and condition of the Mr. Stott bet 4,000 pounds and also agreed to pay for the expenses of Mr. Fogg to go around the world. But if Mr. Fogg will not be able to return in 80 days from today, he will lose 20,000 pounds. Number five, I will take some clothes, my sleeping bags, shoes, and few items needed for my daily use. Next is question 2. Which of the following statements are true and which are false? Write true or false in the brackets. After lunch, Mr. Fogg reappeared in the dining room. False. Number 2. A person who runs away with 55,000 pounds is no robber but a manufacturer, I suppose. This statement is true. Number 3, the robber which had become the talk of the town had occurred 3 days ago at the Bank of England. True. Number 4, according to the Daily Telegraph, the thief belonged to a professional group on the night of the robbery, as shabbily dressed man had been seen going to and fro in the room where the crime was committed. False. He was a gentleman and he was properly dressed. Number 5, they ascended the stairs and unlocked the house door, took the bus from the end of the Savile Row and drove to Charing Cross Airport. No, there are many false things in it, because they took the taxi cab and they went to the Charing Cross railway station, and they have not unlocked, they doubly locked. Number 3, change the following sentences into the plural form. A butcher sells meat. Butchers sell meat. The The postman delivered a parcel. The postman delivered parcels. Number three, the fisherman caught a big fish. The fishermen, it is not man, it is men. The fisherman caught big fish. The lion is a brave animal. The lions are brave animals. Number four, match the following words in list A with their antonyms in list B. Number one, like I told you in my previous lesson of chapter one, to match the column, you will do in the book like this, do the crossing, but in the notebook, you will write the answer in the front, like impressive, you will write insignificant. You will write insignificant in front of the impressive. Annoyed, pleased, engaged, dismissed, approximate, exact, included, excluded, descended, ascended, sufficient, inadequate, inadequate. Number five, match the following words in list A with their synonym in list B. Synonyms are same and antonyms are opposites. Number one, background setting. Beat, hit. Cargo, merchandise. Haggard, warn. Kindle, ignite. Learning, knowledge. So you will write the words and their meaning in the opposite direction, like you will write in front of it. Okay, so this is the end of chapter number 2. Inshallah, see you in the next lesson. Take care of yourself and revise the reading and learn it, learn the exercise and also complete them in your notebooks. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the reading and the exercise. So keep your interest alive and stay with me. See you inshallah soon. Goodbye. Assalamu alaikum.